California family's home is destroyed by fire, but their statue of the Virgin Mary remains completely unharmed. Some might call it a miracle. Others might call it a sign of something more troubling. Is this divine intervention, or is there a hidden message behind the survival of this sacred image while everything else burned to the ground? The devastating Eaton Fire, which raged through the hills of Los Angeles, destroyed everything in its path. Homes were obliterated, entire communities left in ruins, and countless memories turned to ash. Yet in the middle of this chaos, a curious and seemingly inexplicable event occurred. The Halpin family, who were forced to evacuate their home as the fire approached, returned to find their property reduced to nothing but rubble. The structure of their home was gone. Their belongings had turned to dust, but something remarkable was left untouched. Amid the charred remains, there was a striking sight: the statues of the Virgin Mary and St. Joseph, standing pristine and unscathed, as though shielded by an unseen force. To many, this could have seemed like a powerful reminder of faith in the face of overwhelming loss. For the Halpin family, it wasn't just a sight, it was a miracle, a clear sign that God was watching over them during their darkest hour. But let's pause and reflect on the broader context of this incident. The Virgin Mary, a central figure in Christianity, is often associated with mercy, protection, and intercession. In the Catholic tradition, statues of Mary are not just representations, but symbols of divine protection and maternal care. To see this particular statue survive a catastrophic fire would understandably feel like a direct message from the divine. However, the question must be asked, why, in this instance, was it the statue of Mary that was saved, while everything else burned to the ground? Was this a sign of God's favor on the Halpin family, or is there something more layered beneath the surface of this miraculous survival? The Bible often warns of idolatry and the dangers of placing too much reverence on objects. We're taught that God is not confined to statues, and that true worship must come from the heart and spirit. So, what does it mean when an image of Mary, an object that some may see as an idol, survives a fire, while other possessions, the very foundation of the family's life, are destroyed? This moment raises uncomfortable questions about the role of religious symbols and their place in our faith. Is it possible that the survival of the statue could be interpreted as a warning about our attachment to material representations of faith? Or could it be affirming the deep, almost unspoken relationship between divine presence and physical forms, such as statues, that people hold dear? What does it mean when a statue, a physical representation of faith, endures destruction while everything around it is consumed? Is this divine protection or something more complex? The Bible teaches us that God's presence isn't confined to statues or images. Jesus himself, in Matthew 23:19 says, "You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred?" This verse points to the idea that worship and faith are not about the physical objects we create, but about the spirit in which we engage with them. So, could the survival of the statue of Mary be pointing us toward a much larger message, a reminder to focus less on the physical symbols of faith and more on the true essence of spiritual connection? But here's the twist. In the Old Testament, the Israelites were explicitly warned against idolatry. In Exodus 24-5, God says, "You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth below, or in the waters beneath the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. This raises a provocative question. Should we be concerned about the veneration of objects like statues in our spiritual practices? Could the survival of such an image in the midst of a fiery destruction be calling attention to our attachment to material representations of faith? On the other hand, the survival of this statue may not be a condemnation of idolatry at all. Instead, it could be a powerful, almost paradoxical message of divine grace. If we believe that Mary, as the mother of Jesus, embodies mercy and protection, then her statue surviving the flames could be seen as a metaphor for the power of divine intercession. Is God, in his infinite mercy, sending a message that he will protect those who call upon his name, even if they sometimes misplace their focus onto physical forms? Perhaps the survival of the Virgin Mary statue speaks not just to the family's physical protection, but to a deeper spiritual truth, that God's presence can manifest in ways that transcend our understanding. While some may view this as a miraculous act of divine favor, others might see it as a cautionary reminder that true faith should not be rooted in images, but in the living, breathing relationship with God. It's essential to look at what the survival of the Virgin Mary statue could signify within the broader biblical context. Is this a divine sign or simply a freak accident? And more importantly, how does it align with the warnings and teachings throughout Scripture? First, let's consider the concept of divine protection. In the Bible, we see numerous instances where God miraculously protects his people from harm. In the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into a fiery furnace, and yet they emerge unharmed, with nothing but their ropes burned off. Daniel 3:25. Similarly, the survival of the Virgin Mary statue could be seen as a parallel to this, an act of divine protection where God intervenes in a natural disaster to preserve what is holy. But we must not forget the warnings that come with such divine acts. Jesus, in his ministry, often emphasized that true faith comes from the heart, not from the outward display of devotion. Matthew 6:19-21 reminds us, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal." Here, Jesus calls us to shift our focus away from material objects, and yet the survival of a physical statue challenges us to question how much weight we place on these objects as representations of our faith. But it's not just about the physical statue, it's about the deeper message that this event communicates. The survival of the Virgin Mary statue amidst a fire that consumed everything else could be seen as a reminder of the indestructible nature of divine truth. God's message, his presence, and his grace cannot be consumed by the flames of this world. The fire may have destroyed the Halpin family's material possessions, but it did not touch the eternal power of the sacred. This incident serves as a powerful metaphor for the enduring nature of God's protection and love, regardless of the chaos and destruction that surrounds us. Now, let's address the controversial question: is this survival of the statue a message for us to reconsider the role of religious imagery in our lives? The fact that the statue survived while everything around it was destroyed could be interpreted as God's way of highlighting the true purpose of these images, as reminders of faith and instruments to point us toward a higher truth, rather than objects of worship in themselves. Could this event be a gentle correction, a reminder that the power of faith doesn't lie in the object, but in what the object represents?